This episode, finding your property lines. Well, folks, if you're thinking about putting up a fence, installing a shed, seeding your lawn, many home improvement projects require, I know it sounds funny, right? Many home improvement projects require that you know where your property lines are. Trust me, don't get in matches with your neighbors over the property lines or with your county governments. Anyway, we're just going to give you some tips and tricks on how to find your property lines. Some are expensive, some are very inexpensive. But with that, what this show is about, how to find your property lines. Welcome to the Handyman Pros Radio Show, home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros Radio Show, where our goal is to help save you time, money, and aggravation on your home maintenance and repair. This edition is entitled Finding Your Property Lines. And to help me explain, it's my old property line buddy, Mr. Johnny. Johnny, you know, in your case, I know you have to find out where your still is, so you need to know which is, make sure it's on your neighbor's property or in the National Forest part, because that way you're not liable for it. But anyway, did I just say that? Oh, that's not very nice.
You're a thinker.
Every once in a while.
That's the tip of the show, folks. Make sure that any illegality is not on your property.
On your property. That's
I
right.
didn't know the guy was dead. He was dead when I got there.
He was dead when I got there.
So
I can't help the fact that the hole just got dug on the other side of the property.
Yeah.
Anyway, Johnny, what's been going on this week? Anything exciting?
No, I'm just putting a couple of invoices together this morning, Larry. How's that?
Well, that's a good thing.
Time to bring in a little bit of money and move on to my own projects. And you know, I gotta tell you, I don't know if you guys, you know, if all you other folks are like me, but it's like, you know, you try to focus in on getting something done, you know, and you just get this mindset of, I just want to get it done. I just want to get it done while I'm working on it. And there's so many freaking interruptions sometimes.
Oh,
Sometimes it drives me nuts.
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah. You know, I'm on, you know, it's like, I'm trying to line up the transmission with the clutch underneath the car, and I get an interruption of, you know, what do you want for dinner? I'm like, are you out of your mind? So
Johnny,
anyway,
it brings back a personal story. I am actually on a job yesterday. I am out on the job, and I had my wife had an appointment to meet with an attorney, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it was just about some will and you know, about the will and stuff. Right. So long story short, she drags me out the job, makes me drive 25 minutes out over to go to this attorney's office. GPS happened to put me in, this was a building complex. GPS happened to put me in the wrong building, right? So I'm in 500 instead of 300. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. That's irrelevant. But she's calling me on the phone. She says, where are you? Where are you? And then she's talking to the attorney. I hear in the background going, well, does Larry need to be here to sign this? And the guy goes, no. And I'm like, I mean, my level of anxiety is like, really? Like, you drove me, you know, I drove 40.
We could have found out earlier about that.
Yeah, I could have just kind of found
so
out.
Folks, you know, kind of plan out all your steps and ask the questions.
By the way, honey, love you, because she listens to the show. And actually, it worked out perfectly, because this was one of the tips we'll give later. But in this particular job, we ordered the product, and long story short, they packed the wrong things. So I had to go to Lowe's anyway. So it worked out perfectly, because it was right at lunch too. So I grabbed lunch, I went to Lowe's, and it worked out perfectly. But still, that aggravation factor is, this happened to me again yesterday.
Larry, here's something I think the audience, I think we can all relate to. Tell us that, you know, this shingle story about the wrong shingles.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that's what you're referring to here.
Yeah, it's exactly. So John and I were talking about this before.
And I think what I'm seeing, and I just went through the same thing, not with shingles, but some other things, is that I don't know where the carelessness is that's kind of
pervasive,
creeping into this whole ordering thing, is, you know, from the big box stores or whatever. It's like, I mean, I kind of understand it, but it's like, man, is it maddening?
No, not really.
I mean, I
it's
understand.
marked right
Well,
there in
here's
the
what I
package.
understand. I understand it from, the standpoint that, good help is hard to find these days. It always has been, but it's really hard right now. And, man, I'm telling you, you're trying to do a job and half the stuff is like the wrong stuff that you've ordered or you're picking up.
Yeah.
It's like, man.
So this is the story,
Anyways.
right? So we are putting a roof on a shed. Not a big deal. 10 bundles of shingles. 10.
That's
Count
it.
10.
Yeah.
So my son orders the shingles from Lowe's, no big deal, because why not, right? They're going to pick and pull them, and he does. So he orders the shingles, and lo and behold, there I am. I'm up doing the roof. I got like 3 bundles already on. I open the next bundle. It's the wrong color. Okay, and I'm like, really? Because the way that we ordered enough with a little bit of extra to do the whole roof, right?
Yeah.
So and that's 10 bundle 10. Okay, this isn't 100.
Right.
This is 10. And lo and behold, 2 packages, 2 out of 10, 20% are the wrong color. I was livid. I mean, because it's that disruption to the job. I would have been done by the time
exactly
it took me to drive one way to the store to buy the bundle of or the 2 bundles of shingles that I needed. It's like, oh,
in this case, you can lose a half a day.
Well, this was several hours.
Yeah,
right?
Like I said, you can lose a half a day. I got to get in this case. I got to get off the roof, down the ladder. Now I got to
carry the 2 bundles of shingles down the ladder. Right, that I just carried up. Ladder. I didn't, but the boys did. Anyway, whatever. Anyway, all right. So that's not this topic of the show. Before we get started on what the topic of the show is,
fun from the field.
Yeah, fun from the field. We would ask you to like and subscribe both our YouTube channel and our podcast channel. So please do that. It helps get the word out. We're trying to build the audience. Blah blah blah, all that good groovy stuff. So we really appreciate it. All right, back on property lines, Johnny. Why is it important to know where your property lines are? Let's just do a quick synopsis.
Well, I like your lawn seeding thing.
The reason I tell that
throw seed in my neighbor's yard. In all seriousness, it's, hey, if I want to do a fence, I want to plant a tree. There's all kinds of reasons why you need to know where your property line is.
Well, I had a neighbor one time get mad at me because I threw seed into his lawn. And I was like,
no, I mean,
really? I was like, really? I'm an old country boy, I grew up on, our farm was 60 acres, which wasn't even that big, but we didn't cut hairs over, 3 inches on the property line. Never,
right. You're doing 3 inches makes a big difference for a lot of people, but
we're not going to.
You found out, huh? So
we're leaving that one alone. But people get upset. So it's important, to reduce the number of disputes with your neighbors and things like that. It helps to know where you are. But there's other real reasons. Number one, first off, you're paying taxes on that property, blah, blah, blah. You have your personal property rights, and things like that. Also zoning, like if you're going to put up a fence or put up a shed, or I found this out with my shed, right? When I'm in the process of building my shed, I had to be 10 feet off the property line. Well, they weren't going to approve me for a permit unless they could document the actual distance off the property line. And I was trying to cut a close 10 feet, so you got to know where the property line is. If there's easements, you have to know where those easements are. That's all part of that property. You have to know where your property line is to know where the easements are. And then there can be other restrictions as well. We happen to be on a butting up against a Corps of Engineers property line, and they have a very different set of restrictions as to what you can do on the Corps of Engineers property. Like you cannot run heavy equipment on the Corps of Engineers property. So you have to know where the property line is so that you don't run the like in this case, run the chance of getting a fine. So it's really important to kind of have an understanding if you're going to do anything on your property about property lines, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the biggest things I've seen for this is, putting up fences.
Fences are a big one.
Fences are a big one, and the shed issue, at least around here. Now, when I was up in Chicago in more of a very stringent plots, that there was all kinds of things, people putting bushes up again, because you were you know, 14 to 18 feet away from the next house
Right.
in in some cases. I couldn't even drive a car between the homes.
Right.
So it became, hey, I want to put a sidewalk on the side of my house. Okay, well, you got 5 feet to do it. 5 feet to do it from the wall.
Yeah, and then there can be, then like I say, then there can be setbacks off the property line because the county or your municipality doesn't necessarily allow you to put things right on the line. It depends what it is. But these are all things that, you need to check, right? And it's just kind of part of the planning process, but it's also it's good to know. It's just good to know. And like our particular property line at our house is a very funky angle. I mean, it's really like it parallels the side road, but it makes it look very parallelogram. The lot is very parallelogram in shape, and it's caused a bit of dispute because like contractors in general come on and they park on our property and then drive across our property to get to our neighbor's property, and it's like, dude, you just ripped my lawn up.
Right, right, and you just planted it. I mean so there's a lot of reasons to find your property lines. And I will tell you that this can be a challenge because
it can be a challenge.
And over the years, it starts to, the pins start to disappear and people forget and all that kind of stuff,
and so forth and so on. There's another thing, folks, if you're not aware of this, there's a thing called adverse possession too, as well. If you don't use a particular piece of part of your property for 7 years, whoever is using it, we ran into this in a property that we owned in New York State. Our neighbor, we had this little parking area, and it wasn't technically, it was our property, but he parked in there. Well, that SOB, I hate to use those words, but that SOB filed an adverse possession claim against that property to take that property from us because he was using it, and by God, he was going to have it because it was his. Well, lo and behold, by the grace of God, this happened back in the 80s. By the grace of God, we had a picture that had a timestamp on it that showed us parking our vehicle down there. And that's the only reason why we saved our property.
Otherwise, he
owned it for free.
Yeah, back to our initial comments, that's a good place to do some illegal activities then. Okay, it's all yours.
Yeah, right.
The guy's got a body on his yard. He's got a body on his yard. It's your yard. Yeah. So they can be. It can be a challenge to find these things. I know.
It can be.
I know, and they just did a survey from the people in back of me that own this great big piece of land, and they're going to build a house way on the other side. But they had to survey the whole piece of land. Okay, so it backs up into my place. I'm like, huh. So that's where that other pin is. And I talked to the guy doing the survey. I said, well, there's my pin right there. He goes, no, that's not yours. That's his. He goes, yours is over here, and just the way it just cuts through. I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that pin was there. So
Johnny got some free. So there's the first tip. If somebody is surveying the property next to yours, pay attention and talk to the guy.
That's it right there. That's what you do. Pay attention, take pictures, all kinds of stuff, because and then these days put them in a file somewhere, an electronic file, and now you called it property lines, and now you know where your property lines are, because somebody just did you a favor by paying about $500 or whatever the hell it is now to have
more than that, Johnny.
Yeah, to do a survey. So anyways, that's a good tip.
So in finding the property lines, yes,
piggyback off your neighbors.
Well, piggyback off your neighbors is the tip. The first way to actually get your property lines is to actually have a survey done by somebody. Now, it's expensive, folks. It is expensive. But if you want the definitive answer comes with a survey, with an actual survey.
Absolutely.
Now, at some point, boy, I'm going to be careful with this one. At some point, your property should have been surveyed. Now, it depends on the state and the local regulations and this and that. And some states require a survey done every time a property changes hands.
Mm-hmm.
Other states do not. Other municipalities do not. So just be careful. Kind of an interesting story, Johnny. The house I said the house I grew up in was 60 acres. When you read the original survey, it was done with rods and chains.
Mm-hmm.
So back in the day, folks, back before basically satellite imagery and things. This is back. No, this is even before
Or lasers and whatever they're using right now.
Yeah,
right?
or even feet. This goes back
Yeah.
to colonial times. The property we had was measured out in colonial times. They used a thing called a rod and a chain, and basically it was a big stick, or it was a bunch of sticks that were tied together with chains, and they did your survey with rods and chains. And so if you ever see a survey and it says, it's 16 rods and 16 rods from whatever, that's what that refers
Did George Washington do that? He was a surveyor.
George Washington did that. Yes, he did.
He was a surveyor. No, he did your land, right?
He didn't do our land, but our land was actually done by. It was originally.
He's like, hell, man! I'm living in Virginia. I like my place. I'm not going up to the Towner's place.
It was originally owned by somebody that had a land grant from the Revolutionary War, so that's why. So it goes back into the 1700s.
Interesting.
And it had been subdivided and subdivided and subdivided. Here was the amazing thing: the surveyor. We had the property surveyed. This goes back into the 80s, but it doesn't matter. We had the property surveyed, and the guy goes, I'm always amazed every time I do one of these old surveys. He goes, they were dead on.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, they're not 2 inches off over 500 yards, right, with those rods and chains. And I was just like, that's amazing, because today
it just took a long time.
It took a long time.
Yeah, I bet.
But anyway. So have an actual, that's a little aside, but have an actual survey done. That's number one. And yes, it's expensive, but if you need the definitive answer, that's the definitive answer. And get that plat. So they will create a plat. Now you might have a plat in your closing documents. That's one of the other things, or with your deed, or your mortgage company might have the plat also. But if you get the plat, that's that detailed surveyor's drawing, and it should give you measurements and this and that and the other thing. So you can use that. Those are two things that you can do. Today, also, we have these tremendous online resources, right? So there's Google Maps, believe it or not, is incredibly accurate.
Pretty accurate as they drop your plats on the map.
On the map.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate.
And again, depending on what you're trying to do, if you want to run a fence down your property line, I don't know that I would use Google Maps per se.
But it might help you find your pins.
But it might help you find your pins, yes. Because when they do a survey, this is just FYI, they are usually somewhere in the ground, they have driven a pin down into the ground. And it's usually
piece of rebar.
Yeah, it's a piece of rebar or it's some kind of steel pin.
Yeah.
And they can be hard to find because lots of times they just get covered up over the years.
Yeah.
But they nail them down. And you can use a metal detector and try to find that pin. But you need to know where to start to look. And John's right. If you look at Google Maps, or there's other sources. I found a couple. One's called the LandGrid app. It's regrid.com property app. And then there's that's LandGrid.
So
and then there's LandFly.
I've looked at these apps, and I've seen some reviews on them. They're pretty close.
Yeah.
They're not completely dead on, but they probably will get you within about two or 3 feet of the pin.
Yep.
I've seen them. I've seen all these different ones used. Then I've seen a regular survey used, to compare it all.
Right.
But it's amazing how close these things were. Probably close enough for you to kind of dig around, maybe stick a shovel lightly in the ground, see if you can hit the pin.
Yep.
So it is pretty interesting. And if you've lived in your house for a while, you probably pretty much know where your lot line is. But, these things will get you close enough to, hey, I jog your memory. Oh yeah, it's right over here.
Your county or whoever your governmental body has a tax department also, and they use what's called a GIS, or it's Geographical Information Services, and they also, like, you can go on your tax map and they'll give you it's pretty close. I mean, it's definitely going to get you to where that pin is for sure. Again, I mentioned already about the plat, will be the other thing. And then we were talking about using a metal detector to actually find the pins, or as John says, just stick a shovel in. You'll feel it. They're usually about, I don't know what, Johnny, what are they? They're at least a foot long.
Yeah, they're about a foot long, and it's about a half inch. It's about a half inch pin, something like that. I mean, it's a piece of rebar. A lot of them are just rebar that they just jam down, pound down into the ground.
Pound down into the ground. Yep, absolutely. Some of the other things you can do measuring yourself off the plat. Like if you have a known landmark, for example, a street light, a sidewalk, a sign. Back in the ancient days, they would say the forked oak tree. Like you literally read some of the old surveys, but you just need a part. But then you take your plat and you can measure it yourself and just pull it out and do it. Again, everything's kind of relative to what your plan is you're doing. Again, if you want to run right down that property line, make sure you find the pins and then pull a string between the 2 pins. Or 3 pins, depending on the shape of your lot. Because if you've got a dog leg or something, you need to know. But if it's straight line stuff, take a string, find the pin, put something up, take another piece of rebar and nail it up above ground, and 2 pieces of rebar and pull a string. And that'll give you the property line. That's the property line. It's amazing what you can do with a string, right, John?
Yes, Larry.
Those are the
tips. But
that's
a good tip. But that's a good tip, because if you're going to put in a fence, if you're going to plant trees.
Yeah,
I mean,
trees,
and believe me, you don't want to encroach on anybody else's property. So if you're going to pull a string on this thing and you're going to make sure that it's pretty much accurate and stay a little bit inside your place,
exactly,
you're good to go.
Air into your property line
into your property.
Do anything. Air into your property line, particularly if like again on the back of our property there's the Corps of Engineers land, and I don't want to get sideways with the government on that.
No, they have a little bit more money and resources than you do.
Well, and folks,
so you get in a dispute with them, they're going to bury you.
Well, yeah, they're going to tell you to remove it.
Yeah,
and they can by rights tell you. Well, anybody can tell you to remove it. John, my brother actually got into a dispute with his neighbor over a fence line that had been there since the 80s, which I really don't understand how the judge found for the client, because of, again, things like there's a thing in the, if you leave something alone for too long, it does become a part of what's considered normal. But he had a fence line that was dated back into the 80s, and then he was, and his whole property line was skewed about a foot over. He was a foot over on one side, and they were a foot over on his side. And anyway, long story short, it ended up being a huge mess to get this thing fixed. He ended up buying the property from the one guy, and then the other guy wouldn't sell him, wouldn't handle the property the right way. It ended up being a mess. He had to take the damn fence down. It was a mess. I mean, it was a mess.
Was that the judge's son?
Yes. Well, we're not sure. Honest to God, I mean, this was something like you've got to.
So, I mean, these are the kind of things, folks, that you can get into, and there's horror stories out there over the place. Believe me, over the place. And the last thing you want to do, okay, and this is the main thing here, we're trying to save you money and time and aggravation, is to get in some kind of a petty lawsuit where everybody's got things to do. You got to work, you got kids, you got the wife, you got everything else, and you don't need to start squabbling with, your neighbors and monetary resources that you're putting out, and all the time and all that stuff over something like this, if it can be avoided.
That 100% correct. And I can give you from personal experience, you're going to spend at least $10,000 to settle it in court, at least, and probably more.
Yeah. So
probably more.
Yeah, you guys don't need that. So
you just don't need it. All right, Johnny, with that, what do you think they do in outer space?
Well, let me just say this before we go there. Far out, man. I would say that, once you find your pin, okay, this is what I did. Okay, so the surveyors come out here, and now I'm finding a pin. Now I know where the front ones are. These guys marked all my other ones. I went to each pin, and I marked them in a GPS app in my phone.
Nice.
And I named them which pins they were.
Yep.
So the absolute location is on a GPS in my phone and on record of each one of those pins, so I can always go back and walk it, and I'll be within like a couple of feet of it, and I'll be like, there it is, there's that one. I walk back, boom, there's that one, and it's got the little arrows pointing. It's like, oh, bank, that kind of thing. I'm like, now you know. So
the wonders of technology.
Yeah. So don't underestimate your iPhone, folks. You can do a lot of things. Anyways,
there's a lot of things you can do.
Anyways, Larry.
Well,
so speaking of pins and pounding and things like that, the aliens were at your door.
Something like that. All right. Anyway, folks, with that, please like and subscribe to the podcast and or the YouTube channel. We really appreciate it. It helps get the word out. We hope we are saving you some time, money, and aggravation on your home maintenance and repair. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, hit us up, questions@handymanprosradioshow.com, and we will respond. We always do. We get great content and great questions from our listeners, I should say, all of that good stuff. All right. With that, Johnny, we got anything else?
Nope. That's it, folks.
Take us home, baby.
All right, folks. Find your property line. Don't get in any disputes. And have a great week. We'll see you next time on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.